So let's talk about me entering the theater world. I've told this story a number of times in person to a lot of different people, and uh, the stories change, I would say, because of how I'm talking about them and depending on the conversation, and also it's depending on how much information I want people to know. So other people have heard this story differently, um, and some other people have also not heard the story at all. So this recording will be basically that story in its entirety and fullerity. So I hope that when people ask me what got me into acting and what got me into theater, I honestly will have them look up this podcast and listen to this specific episode because this is the one that actually is the bulk of why I do what I do and why I am doing this podcast and why I am here. So I mentioned back in my previous story that I was struggling with reading and that I needed help to get better at reading and to get better at being in school. And I was looking at myself, thinking to myself, oh man, like this sucks. I'm never going to be good unless I work harder to prove that I don't need the help anymore. And so that's exactly what I did. I studied harder, I read more, I did what I could. I got through the motions of not only you know, learning about stories, learning about math, learning about history, but also, navigating through crises with my families and other life situations when I was a kid, and obviously moving from different cities too. Uh, but at the end of the day, it just finally, it wasn't until junior high where they finally said, you know what, Stefan, you're doing a really great job. We really don't see any reason for us to keep trying to help you anymore because you're actually proving to us that you're well off and that you're capable of understanding what's required of you. And so you won't be subjected to do that. However, I still got a little bit of restrictions. And some small training wheels here and there, but nothing too major, nothing that um, I could look back at and say, you know what, that really was terrible because it's just all irrelevant now. However, I do well enough that I start to become motivated in what I actually like to see in my life. And so I decided I wanted to be an engineer because of math and science, uh, and how, distinct those subjects are, but also very general because they can give you a wide variety of opportunities. And since my dad was an engineer, I figured, you know what, why don't I become an engineer? My father always said that math and science are great because there's always going to be one right answer to, you can only get the answer right once. And, there's a bunch of different ways you can do the work. In fact, there are so many new ways to make math easier, but you're always going to end up with one right answer. And that's, a good thing. It means that you know that you can be right and you know that that will help you forever. So I do well in math and science. I take calculus, I take advanced physics. I do well enough to keep going. And I'm staying away from reading because that's not my brightest subject. That's definitely not where I get my popularity. And so I do well with everything leading up to my first engineering class. And then the pandemic hits, and everybody has to go inside, everybody has to stay indoors, social distance. I basically am not allowed to go to school. And that's where like the way of life of school changed for me and obviously changed for a lot of other people too. I'm not singling myself out here, but I immediately lost interest in what I was striving for. All of the all of the work that I was doing, you know, trying to not get the help and then suddenly realizing that even what was there to help me also failed too, made me realize that it wasn't worth it anymore. And I was still doing well. That's what's so weird about it, is I actually was still doing well at math and science. That I could have kept going and kept studying to be an engineer. But evidently I fell under the pressure. I was too worried about what would happen if I would fail, if I would have to go back to, requiring assistance. And so I dropped out and I start to wonder about employment opportunities. I start wondering about what would life would be like if I didn't have to go to college and be successful. And I still do here and there in my lifetime. I work for the civil service, I work for packaging companies, I start doing minimum wage jobs, which overall are very fun, but also, very tiring. But at the same moment, I was making money. I was actually living on my own and having my own freedom. The issue, though, is I obviously was too young. My father didn't like that, and frankly, I didn't like that either. My friends also, were not around as much when I was working through minimum wage. And I eventually said, you know what? The pandemic is kind of reaching its tail end. I think we're going to go back to the way things were, or at least go to a new normal. So I think what I can do is I can just go back to school and study something that interests me and just take that to where it goes. And I didn't really want to go back to engineering. I didn't want to go back to studying all that math and that science that I already had learned, but also forgot in the previous time that I wasn't in college. So I spoke to counselors, I spoke to people uh, who were, psychologists in picking majors, and I suddenly landed on theater because of more of a study of behavioral change than actual reading and storytelling. It was more of a quest to be me. And then obviously, learn about stories, but it was more of a self journey that had to take. And so I realized that I wasn't doing theater just because of, I wanted to make the world a better place. It was because I wanted to make myself a better person. I was doing it for me. And, at the custom of that, I had to learn how to read again. Not only did I not learn how to read again, but I also had to learn how to read better and more fluently, and obviously with this new adaptability. But I realized is that there's not that much reading in theater as much as I thought. So I ended up still doing really well, and I even took other classes that also had to deal with some math and some science. Only in the case of theater, I took communication courses and read more, but I read stuff that I was interested in. And that's what really hit it for me, is whatever I was interested in, not what, pulled me away because of other negativity. So that's the main gist of this is the industry brought me into it because of self-interest, not because of negative disinterest.